Marine reacts to SCP-682, The Inevitable End of All But Me, featuring Dr. Sumerian, by SCP Illustrated. As always, I'm going to be leaving a link to the original video and channel down in the description below, so go ahead and make sure that you check them out. So with this SCP, this isn't going to necessarily be like in the form of a document, which I can really tell. This is more like just tales. Honestly, I'm really getting into the way SCP Illustrated is actually constructing these. And I'm seeing Dr. Sumerian's name come up a lot. And I've actually checked his channel. Also, I'm very curious just to see what SCP-682's reaction is going to be. Like, I don't know how everything is going to end or everything has really ended. He's just kind of going through the world, seeing what he's going to do. Is he going to be somewhat sad or depressed or lonely? Is he going to be just completely happy, content that everything is just dead? I don't know. But before we get into the actual video, don't forget to like, subscribe. It really does help me out a lot. Hit that notification bell right there, or you get notified every time I do upload. Sometimes I'll upload twice a day, typically working on them in the mornings and releasing them in the late afternoon to late evening. That way when you don't get off work, you can enjoy the videos at your leisure. So without further ado, let's go ahead and see what SCP-682 is going to do when there's only him.
Good day everyone and welcome back to SCP Illustrated for the first video of 2020, and it's a 682 video. But it's not a versus video this time. This is a custom tale written by Dr. Sumerian and myself, though mostly Sumerian, I just pitched the idea. So in this video we see 682 as the universe slowly begins to die all around him. It's not dying from an XK event, it's just time. After trillions and trillions of years, even the universe will begin to grow old, and 682 has a front seat for all of it. There's no content warning needed for this one, except you might feel some sympathy for 682 by the end. But apart from that, let's begin.
Wait, so this is happening as if it was happening trillions of years in the future, and everything just died. I mean, because obviously everything's in a... But that's saying that the human race also just died out, eventually. I mean, obviously I don't think one race can keep on going for however long. Maybe everybody that he knows of, or at least in his, what would be considered his world, is gone. And maybe humans expanded across the stars. It's giving me 40K vibes. And he just is by himself. I don't know. I've been really liking these stories or these tales. So let's keep going.
The following data release has been authorized by the following council members and administration staff.
Hold on. If a being that wanted nothing but the end of everything, a literal of creation and existence, was suddenly confronted with the end of everything, then what would they become? Seeing as they are part of that everything, they would end too, and so their desire would be their undoing. However, what if the being lived past the end of everything? With everything gone, what would they want? What would it exist for? And once its desires and purpose have been fulfilled, with nothing left, then surely they could not want for anything, and anything they did want for would be unattainable because of the state of nothing. If an immortal wanted death, then by definition it would be unattainable. Therefore, their want to the end of everything has resulted in them realizing that really they were looking for an end to themselves. I don't know, Dr. Sumerian, I don't know how you do it, man. It gave me chills a little bit.
Humans were more powerful than he'd been willing to give them credit for. They shot him, burned him, electrocuted him, and finally threw him in a box. If humans could handle fighting each other, they could certainly handle fighting him. They solved world hunger, brought about world peace, cured every disease, filled every need. But they grew bored with their crystalline cities they built for themselves. The end of all things crept quietly along after them, unnoticed. As soon as they stopped fighting, mankind was no more. He still hated them, of course, but the ease at which they went almost astonished him. Suddenly no one cared enough. Suddenly almost no children were born. A few metal tubes threw themselves violently off the planet, and then, quite suddenly, humanity died altogether. He escaped not long after. After the end though, the damage they'd done to the world crashed into reality, and the world died too. Plants withered away, then anything that ate plants, and then everything else. In a few thousand years, the carrion eaters died off and he was truly alone.
Okay, so some people escaped, or not necessarily escaped, but they just, I guess it looks like they were just traveling out of the world, maybe to go colonize somewhere else. I don't know. I mean, the way the future was being depicted, it seemed like they were pretty far off advanced, but apparently that had something to do with destroying the world, which probably killed everyone who was still there. And they said things about not even having children anymore. So maybe they were, I don't know if he said it, but maybe they found a way to prolong their lives. And then it seems like, at least with this tale is going, that he doesn't seem contained anymore. And, I mean, it's astonishing to know that even after all these years, they still haven't managed to find a way to kill him. I don't know. This is interesting. This is really crazy.
At first, it was a welcome change. He'd learned the hard way that eternity was only really worth it when things changed. And without any other life around, nothing really changed on a day-to-day scale. He'd wake up, look out over the dead earth, oceans, or at a nearly unchanging sky, and then go back to sleep. For endless eons he waited. He charted the stars by drawing in the dead earth and feel a pang of joy whenever one of them died. But they were always being replaced. Over and over he'd see one die and another be born. But humans had done the same thing for a long time as well. The sun had gotten larger and larger in the sky over time. Then it ballooned to fill the entire daytime sky. The oceans turned to deserts and the deserts turned to molten glass. The whole surface of the earth glowed a deep orange.
Wait, so did the sun actually finally explode? Like, I don't know what it's called. But eventually every star is gonna die out, and then it creates, I don't know if it was a black hole, supernova. I'm not really too versed on astronomy or anything space-wise. And it looks like that kind of happening. It seems like it might revert to a cycle where it's like it's got to restart whatever world we're in the vicinity, it seems. Honestly, I'm starting to feel like right now it's not, I mean, he might be happy right now, but it's starting to seem like he might get depressed. Or not depressed, but bored. Because with eternity, like he said, only thing that really spices everything up is change. So if everything is the same all the time, then boredom could really set in.
He suffered through the worst of it for a few million years, perching on the few rocks sturdy enough to stand up to the heat. He screamed when he could, but no one was around to hear him. Then the sun shrank into a tiny white point in the sky, larger than the brightest stars, but only just. The dead earth slowly cooled, though there was no atmosphere left to breathe. He was alone with his own thoughts, and again, he began to chart the stars. At first, it continued on as before. The charts began to cover more and more of the earth. With nothing but time, he drew his constellations and calculations and came to a conclusion. The stars were dying too. Once they'd been replaced as quickly as they died, but now, maybe 2 died before another was born. Later still, 3. Then 4. The number kept climbing until there was only a few dozen stars left in the sky. The only record that the sky had once been filled with light was etched on continent-spanning star charts across the surface of the dead earth. He realised, of course, that his fate was inevitable. Even after all the stars had gone, he would still be here. He would be the only thing left in an infinite darkness that would continue for eternity. He rested his head on the rock and gazed at the star, wondering for how much longer it would burn before fizzling out.
I mean, it's hard to even comprehend if he did have immortality like the way he does, but there still hasn't been any explanation at all as to why this is the case, as far as why he is immortal. I think it's just one of the kind of things that's just how he is, what he is. And I don't know. I mean, it kind of makes you start to feel a little sympathetic for him. I mean, in a weird way, but it's like, is everything eventually despite how many every years it takes, is everything eventually just going to come crashing down?
Then one day, a trillion years after the last star had blinked out, 682 squinted at the dark night sky. A new star had formed. This one was brighter than anything he'd ever seen before. It moved strangely and quickly. Eventually it darkened and disappeared. A few years on, another star joined it and darkened again. And then another. For millennia, they grew a colony above him. Larger and larger still until it hung over him, like a tantalizing treat, just out of reach. Then they began to land on his world. He felt the rage return. His world. His home. But they deliberately avoided his drawings, chose the few blank spaces between the constellations and calculations to dig out the Earth. Then they placed boxes gingerly into the ground, covered them, and drew new markings.
Holy shit. Okay, so now we got people from a different, it looks like maybe a different galaxy. Could be a whole different universe altogether. But, okay, so at no point did he seem like lonely, maybe just bored at the most. But this is crazy. Maybe, I wonder if he's going to just revert back to his old ways and try to kill them? I mean, it could just be explorers. And then the fact that they're avoiding his drawings, I don't know. Maybe you might see a change in his heart, so to speak. Now, I mean, I don't have high hopes of that, but, you know, anything can happen.
In a few months they returned, this time with another box. He approached their landing party this time, staying as hidden as he could. He looked, and they were humans. He listened to the ground for the vibrations of their speech, but the language was nothing he'd ever heard before.
That's probably the people, I'm not reading that next little part just yet. Those are probably the people that left in those two ships in the beginning. And maybe these are the descendants, and they're trying to go back to Earth to recolonize.
Over and over, year after year they came, and year after year he would go and listen. Eventually, he understood their language. Today he'd woken up to another shooting star again coming to his home. He made his way to the landing site and waited. The men and women followed the same pattern as always. He suspected they knew he was there, but they'd made no moves against him. Maybe one day he'd kill them, destroy their ship, or take it to the stars and end them once and for all. But for all his petty fantasy, he knew that he would be alone soon enough. Time would destroy whatever he didn't, and in the end, he'd just be bored sooner. So he let them have their ceremony. The box was laid into a freshly dug hole, and a man in a slightly shinier suit stood and spoke to half a dozen other figures.
Malnos Tharash, the spawn of 2 Greldniks, would have had more grace and kindness than you. You hurt everyone with your words or hands or tools. It did not matter to you. And for this, we are sorry. Though we deserved better from you, so too did you deserve better from us. Instead, you died hungry, alone, in the between spaces. You scarcely had a bed and no quarters to call your own. I commit now your soul to the stars, the home of your ancestors. I commit now your body to the earth, the home of their ancestors. I hope you find the peace you deserved in life, somehow. May the Starkeeper bless your passing. May the Starkeeper bless your ancestors. And may the Starkeeper bless us all.
The humans covered the hole with dirt slowly, and then shuffled into their ship. SCP-682, the Starkeeper, and the last witness to a dying universe, watched them disappear into the black eternity. He walked over to the grave, pawed at the freshly dug ground, spun in place atop it, and took a nap. And that is how SCP-682 will spend the rest of his existence. Cold, alone, and unable to escape the eternal darkness that will befall the universe eventually. It's all well and good being immortal until even the universe dies of old age.
Let's go ahead and talk about that for a minute. So I kind of had a feeling that the Star Keeper was going to be considered 682, and it seems that they kind of revered him in terms of some kind of god-ish, kind of, at least in this tale. And it seemed like 682 actually felt a little bit of maybe, I don't know if sympathy would be the right word, but some kind of, I guess, attachment. As far as when he said that he did little circles, which kind of reminded me of like a puppy, but then laid down on it. And you just see all these star maps, constellation charts, and they're just spanning the whole entire world. And I couldn't get over the fact it's like trillions and trillions of years, just everything dying eventually. But then we see these people, and then it's like, well, maybe they just went out and they weren't on Earth, but maybe humanity, and those were the descendants from the people that left, and they were still, so technically they're still from Earth, at least their ancestors were. So maybe they just found somewhere else to be, and maybe that just keeps happening, because eventually the star would die out, and then they just gotta keep hopping from planets to planet. I guess immortality always sounded, I guess, great, but I mean, obviously you're gonna outlive everybody, close ones, and just existence itself. It was kind of interesting to see how he would actually respond to this type of scenario. It seemed like he liked it in the beginning, and after a while, just boredom sets in, and then finally starts seeing people. And the fact that he has all the power and will to actually just kill them right off the spot. He even talked about it a little bit of what he was thinking of doing. It's still kind of, I get weird to see from what I do know about him, that he was just still kind of creeping. He was kind of still doing a little bit of recon just to see kind of what they're doing. Maybe curiosity. Maybe he's bored. Maybe he's just trying to get something to spice in his mood at the time. But he never really did anything towards them. So that struck me as a little, maybe his mentality is changing ever so slightly, even though it's taking trillions of years for it to actually happen. That's gonna go it though, and do it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, it really does help me a lot. Hit that dislike button if you didn't like it. Helps me improve the channel. If you're curious to see what's coming up next, check the description down below. You're gonna see a list of about 5. Top to bottom is gonna be how I view them. But until then, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.